The story begins with a girl named Jia who lives with her father, Li. Jia's mother passed away many years ago, so Li has raised Jia on his own and loves her very much. One morning, Jia gets ready for school. After breakfast, Li takes her to school, reminding her to study hard. Jia tells him she wants a dog, saying all her friends have one. Li explains that having a dog is a big responsibility because it needs food and walks. Jia promises she'll take care of it if he gets one for her. After dropping Jia off, Li goes to his job at a construction company. After school, Jia plays with her friends and loses track of time until evening. Meanwhile, Li, busy at work, sends Jia a message asking her to come home soon because it's about to rain. Jia quickly leaves the playground and walks to the train station with her friends, who say goodbye and leave her to go home alone. Li finishes work, thinking Jia is already home. When he checks her room, he finds it empty. He searches the house and tries calling her, but her phone goes straight to voicemail. Growing anxious, he calls Jia's friends, who tell him they left her at the station. Li's heart races with fear. He rushes to the station, looking everywhere and calling her name. But he can't find her. As hours pass, he becomes more and more worried. The next day, some people notice something strange in the river, a body floating on the water. Officer Jun and his junior officer arrive to investigate. When they get close, Officer Jun realizes it's Jia's body, wrapped in plastic. His heart sinks as he examines the scene, seeing that she has been in the water for at least 34 hours. He tells his team to check for any missing person reports to learn more. After some time, Officer Jun calls Li to the hospital. When Li arrives and sees his daughter's lifeless body, tears flood his eyes. He is in disbelief that the vibrant girl he had shared laughter and love with just the day before is gone forever. Jun gently asks Li if Jia had a boyfriend, hoping to gather leads in the investigation. Li shakes his head, utterly confused and devastated, unable to comprehend why anyone would harm his daughter. The loss feels unbearable, and he is left with countless questions, haunted by the mystery of Jia's tragic fate. After Jia's body is examined, a post-mortem is conducted, and the forensic report reveals a disturbing truth. 2 individuals were involved in Jia's tragic fate. Officer Jun, noticing Li's devastated state, decides not to share the details with him. He can see that Li is shattered and feels entirely alone in the world. Li is consumed by guilt, believing that if he had gone to pick up Jia himself, she might have been safe. An assistant officer tries to comfort Li, assuring him, "Don't worry, we will find the culprits." The next day, Jun and his junior officer return to the location where Jia's body was discovered. Jun speculates that the perpetrator must have hurriedly discarded her body, intending to make it disappear. Unfortunately, the body didn't sink as planned. The junior officer expresses concern, saying, "If these people don't have a criminal record, it will be very difficult to track them down." This statement adds to Jun's worry, but they remain determined to seek justice for Jia. Back at the station, they start reviewing the CCTV footage. They manage to spot Jia for the last time at the station and notice a woman lingering outside. Their attention is drawn to a white van parked nearby, sparking their suspicion. They zoom in on the footage and manage to catch a glimpse of the driver's face. They learn that his name is Leo. The following day, the officers visit the area where the van is parked, close to Leo's house. They find Leo inside, busy cleaning the van. As they investigate, they spot Jia's phone tucked away inside. Leo quickly pockets the phone, which raises further suspicion. Feeling increasingly anxious at the sight of the police, Leo rushes inside his house and locks himself in his room. His mind races back to the night when Jia was walking alone. Leo and his friends Wang and Yu were sitting in their van when they spotted her. Eager for a thrill, they decided to approach her. The 3 of them got out of the van and, under the cover of darkness, grabbed Jia from behind, rendering her unconscious. They placed her inside the van and drove to Wang's house, where they laid her on the bed. Just then, Leo received a call from his father, who told him to bring the van back home. Feeling anxious about leaving his friends with Jia, Leo reluctantly told Wang and Yu he was going home. Deep down, he feared his friends would do something terrible to Jia. Wang and Yu taunted him, reminding him that since he had driven the car, he would be implicated if anything went wrong. Meanwhile, Li was spiraling into despair after losing his daughter. In his grief, he found himself riding the same metro train Jia had taken on her last journey. While traveling, he caught a glimpse of a news report on TV announcing the discovery of Jia's body in the river. Panic seized him. He hurried to meet his friends for support, but they coldly told him that if Jia had lived, she would have surely reported them to the police. To keep their secret safe, they had killed her. They warned Leo to stay quiet about what happened, and in a fit of rage and guilt, they beat him for suggesting that they had done something wrong by taking Gia's life. Unable to cope with the weight of his conscience, Leo decided to take action. He grabbed Gia's phone and headed to the river where her body was found. Filled with sadness and regret, in a moment of desperation, he messaged Li from Gia's phone, revealing the truth. "Your daughter was killed by Wang and you." He even provided Li with Wang's address before throwing the phone into the river, hoping to erase any trace of his involvement. Meanwhile, Li, driven by a burning desire for answers, receives the shocking message. After failing to get a response from Wang when he calls, Li heads straight to Wang's house to confront him. Finding the door locked, Li remembers that Leo had mentioned a spare key, so he uses it to enter the home. Once inside, he begins searching the house, determined to find clues. Just then, Wang arrives, chatting with someone on the phone. Li quickly hides, his heart pounding. As he watches from his hiding place, he spots Gia's bag, sending waves of sorrow crashing over him. His eyes land on Wang's computer, and a surge of anger rises as he realizes Wang might have recorded what he did to Gia. Wang sits at his desk, seemingly unbothered, watching the horrific video from that night. Believing himself untouchable because he's only 17, fueled by grief and rage, Li decides he wants revenge for what happened to his beloved daughter. He storms in front of Wang, his fury boiling over, and confronts him. Without hesitation, Li lunges, and a fierce fight breaks out. In a fit of rage, Li grabs a baseball bat and strikes Wang, killing him instantly. The moment is chaotic, filled with the echoes of their struggle and the realization of Li's actions. Afterward, Li takes a moment to collect himself and grabs Wang's phone. Changing his clothes to avoid suspicion, he leaves the house and sends a message from Wang's phone pretending to be him. Meanwhile, the police, led by Officer Jun, arrive at the scene of the crime and begin their investigation. They discover the horrifying video Wang recorded, not only of Gia but also of 2 other girls he had victimized. This evidence adds a disturbing layer to the case and raises questions about Wang's past actions. Later, Officer Jun attempts to call Li, but he doesn't answer. Investigators find blood-stained clothes in Li's home, leading them to suspect his involvement in Wang's murder. Realizing the urgency, Jun and his team intensify their efforts to apprehend Li. They also decide to arrest Leo, recognizing his potential involvement in the crimes. Leo's wealthy and influential parents are summoned to the police station for questioning. When Jun explains what their son is accused of, they quickly jump to his defense. "He's just a kid," they insist, downplaying the seriousness of the situation. Frustrated by their denial, Jun feels his anger rise, determined to seek justice. As Leo's parents prepare to leave, the father of another victim confronts them, shouting, "Your son killed my daughter." His voice is filled with anguish as he reveals that Li had also wronged his daughter, blackmailing her to keep quiet about the abuse. Consumed by shame and despair, she had ultimately taken her own life. Meanwhile, Li arrives at a secluded place he often retreats to, a rented house tucked away from the world. Holding Wang's pen drive, he discovers a video revealing that Wang had harmed a girl in a nearby garage. Fueled by anger and desperation, Li heads to the garage. When he arrives, the mechanics refuse to share information unless he pays them. Frustrated, a fight breaks out. And during the scuffle, one of the workers is shot in the leg, sending everyone into a panic. In the chaos, the injured worker reveals a location where Leo often hangs out but admits he doesn't know much more. As Li's actions make headlines, a woman watching TV recognizes him and decides to help. While he's away, she sneaks a look at the videos on his laptop to understand more about his situation. Seeing that she understands his story, Li tells her he doesn't need to take the law into his own hands. The police will catch the criminals eventually. "But what about my daughter?" he says sadly. "She's never coming back." Meanwhile, Officer Jun finds a video on the pen drive that shows Li in a hotel with a clear shot of Leo, leading to an arrest order. Driven by his need for justice, Li heads to the hotel with the woman's help, evading the police. He positions himself at the hotel, waiting for Leo, gun in hand. When the police arrive, they find a frightened girl who claims Leo hurt her and filmed their encounters. She receives a call from Leo and, in a panic, tells him the police are nearby. Realizing he needs to escape, Leo takes off on his bike, but Li is ready. In a desperate move, Li aims and fires, causing Leo to crash. The chase begins as Leo gets to his feet and flees into a nearby forest. Officer Jun spots Li and calls for him to stop, but Li keeps running. "They did terrible things to my daughter. I can't let them get away," he shouts. June, torn between his duty and his understanding of Li's pain, ultimately decides to let him go. Later, June talks with his junior officer about a tragic case, noting how the justice system sometimes fails victims. Meanwhile, Leo contacts a friend, asking for money and arranging to meet at the station at midnight. The police, listening nearby, prepare to intercept him. Li is also waiting, hidden with a gun, ready for revenge. When Leo arrives and takes the money, the police move in to arrest him. In the chaos, Li confronts Leo, who begs for mercy. Fueled by rage, Li shoots Leo, and an officer then shoots Li. Injured but alive, Li loses one eye from the gunshot. A year later, Officer June and his team visit Li's memorial to honor him. Standing quietly, June reflects on how hard it is to teach children to do the right thing. The story of Li's pain and loss weighs heavily on them as they consider the flaws in the justice system. The film ends, leaving the audience to reflect on the impact of these events. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.